He had always called her useless. The words were a refrain that echoed through their sterile apartment, bouncing off marble, countertop she polished to a high shine, and the perfectly coordinated furniture she arranged. They were a commentary on her slightly overcooked rice, a criticism of a forgotten dry cleaning ticket, a scoff at her quiet attempts to sketch in a notepad when the house was silent. Clara absorbed it all, a quiet, shrinking woman in expensive, empty rooms, her spirit slowly eroding under the constant drip of disdain. Her world was the orbit of his needs. Her identity, as defined by Michael, was that of a competent but ultimately disappointing accessory. The divorce was his idea, presented with cold finality. "It's just not working. You need more than I can give," he'd said, which was a kinder translation of what she heard. "You are not enough." She offered no fight, no tearful scene. She simply nodded, signed the papers he had already drawn up with a startling efficiency, and asked only for a few personal items. He granted it with a magnanimous air, relieved at her lack of resistance, already envisioning a brighter, more dynamic future unencumbered by her quiet uselessness. Clara vanished from his life as quietly as a shadow at noon. For months, Michael reveled in his freedom. He dated a brilliant lawyer, hosted loud parties that left wine stains on the carpets Clara would have wept over, and enjoyed the silence that was no longer her silence, but his own choice. It was during one of these parties, aiming to impress a potential investor, that he first saw the name Clara Vance. It was emblazoned on a massive digital billboard in the city center, advertising a sold-out gallery exhibition titled Reclamation, The Art of Clara Vance. The style was unmistakable, delicate, intricate lines weaving into powerful, emotive forms, often framed by subtle, haunting depictions of gilded cages and fractured mirrors. He recognized the motifs from the margins of her old notepads. He laughed it off. A coincidence. A different Clara Vance. But the name persisted. It appeared in the Financial Times, a short piece on the unprecedented market frenzy for a new artist's work. It was in a prestigious arts magazine left in his lawyer's office, featuring an interview. His blood ran cold as he read a quote. "My art emerged from a place of being told I was nothing. Every stroke is a word I never said." He bought the magazine, his hands trembling, and stared at the photograph. It was her. But it was a Clara he had never seen. Her posture was straight, her eyes held a direct, piercing calm, and a subtle, assured smile played on her lips. She spoke of a decade, spent in a curated prison, of finding her voice only in absolute silence. The article mentioned a major museum acquisition and an upcoming international tour. A sickening vertigo overtook him. He rushed home, not to his apartment, but to the storage unit where he had dumped the last of her belongings. Buried under old linens, he found a portfolio. He tore it open. Inside were not the hesitant doodles he remembered, but breathtaking, finished pieces of very blueprints of the art now commanding astronomical sums. On the back of one, in her elegant script, was a note for Michael, who never looked. He had been living with a genius and had called her useless. The woman whose works were now the toast of the cultural world had cooked his meals and folded his socks while he blinded himself with his own arrogance. Desperation, a cold, clammy thing, gripped him. It was not about love that had died long ago, but about a profound, terrifying error in judgment. He had discarded a masterpiece and labeled it trash. His pride, once a towering edifice, now lay in ruins around him, each piece a whispered echo of his own cruelty. He had to see her. He had to make her understand, or rather, make himself understand what he had lost. Tracking her down took all his resources. She was no longer in the city, but preparing for her London exhibition. He used old contacts, called in favors, and finally secured a private meeting at her agent's office, presenting himself as a collector with a serious offer. When he walked into the minimalist, sunlit space, the air left his lungs. She stood by the window, a vision of composed elegance, The timid housewife was utterly gone, replaced by a woman of serene, unassailable power. She turned, and her expression didn't change. There was no shock, no anger, just a calm, distant recognition, as if viewing a mildly interesting object. "Michael," she said, her voice level. Not a question. Words, his usual arsenal, failed him. The rehearsed speeches about regret and realization evaporated. All that remained was a raw, ugly truth. "Clara, I saw everything. The exhibitions, the articles." He stammered, his voice breaking. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't see you." "You never tried to," she replied, not unkindly, but with a finality that felt like a door closing. He fell apart then. The begging he had sworn he would never do poured out in a torrent. "I was a fool, a blind, arrogant fool. You were who you are. Incredible. What I said, what I called you. It haunts me every day. Please, can you ever forgive me? Is there any chance? I'll do anything. I'll forgive you." She interrupted, her head tilting slightly. The word hung in the air, neither accepted nor rejected, simply examined. "Michael, your forgiveness is no longer a courtesy I deal in. You asked for a divorce, and it was the greatest gift you ever gave me. It was the key to my cage. My life, my identity, my work, it all exists in the space you vacated." He stood there hollowed out, the full magnitude of his loss crashing over him. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had actively pushed away a legend, a woman whose name would outlive his own in every meaningful way. His pleas for a second chance were not just pathetic. They were irrelevant to the life she had built. "I don't want you back," she said, answering the question he could no longer voice. "I want you to understand. I want you to live with the crystal clear understanding of what you so carelessly discarded. That is all. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a world waiting." She gave him one last, lingering look, not of hatred, but of profound, absolute pity. Then she turned and walked away, the click of her heels on the polished floor the only sound in the tomb of his regret. He stood alone in the bright room, the man who had called Clara Vance useless, finally understanding the meaning of the word as it applied, with perfect, devastating accuracy, only to himself.